Welcome to the next episode of the EO podcast with entrepreneurs from Morocco. I'm very excited to have you here, Arif. Thank you for making time today and being here with us to answer a few questions about your own businesses, your career, but also about the life of entrepreneurs in Morocco and the Moroccan entrepreneurship scene. Welcome.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to meet you. And let's dig in. Let's see what we can explore.
The first question I have, I detect a British accent. I assume you went to the UK for education, or what did you pick that up from?
No, I was actually born in England, essentially. So I moved to Morocco around 10 years ago. And that's when we decided to branch out, should we say, and explore the Moroccan North Africa market. So that's where my accent comes from. Thankfully, I've kept it, and it's not changed.
And your parents are Moroccan, or how did it brought you back to Morocco?
Actually, I got married in Morocco. So I started my family in Morocco, and that's one of the reasons why I came to Morocco initially. And my family, or my parents, were actually born in Malawi, in Africa, but my grandparents were born in India. So we've got multiple mixed roots scenarios.
Because I was just about to say, you don't look Malawian, or in my imagination, they look different than you do.
That's it. So, so we've got a mixed heritage, but everyone likes to claim me for them, should we say. So every country I go to, they always get confused, and I end up being one of them.
Interesting. So tell me a little, so we already touched a bit sort of like on your family history. Let's talk about when you came to Morocco. Was that your first entrepreneurial venture? Have you done things before? How did you get into entrepreneurship?
I think it started whilst I was in England, actually. So my family itself has always been in business, ultimately. So I grew up in that environment. So I essentially started an import-export business from England out of Turkey. We were doing textiles and other products in that sense. And I then moved on to the tobacco industry in the US. So we set up a tobacco plantation with some local partners. And from there, it led me into the finance industry, where originally we started in Dubai, but we moved into Africa directly from there. So it's been a gradual stepping stone to lead up to Africa, ultimately.
And to finance.
Exactly.
The jump from tobacco to finance is quite a jump.
Well, sometimes you only learn what you're good at when you're thrown into that position. And that's ultimately what happened to me. It was just luck. I was just at a meeting, and all of a sudden, a Spanish group approached me, and they said, "Would you like a challenge?" And I said, "Okay, what's the challenge?" So we have 100 million. Can you do anything with it? I said, okay, so if I'm on a spending spree, let's have a go. And ultimately, we created around 3 billion euros in 6 months. And that's when I started realizing that, okay, my skill set is finance. So let's go deeper into it. And that was what I mentioned about Sudan, because it was ultimately for Sudan that we did that for. And that's where my passion came from. In finance.
Let's take a step back. So the Spanish group that came, who was that, or what venture was that? Was that cable exchange?
It was actually a company called Intertoco. It was a Spanish company registered in Spain. They had the government contracts for rebuilding and refining Sudan. The president is an origin from Mexico, and he has connections with the US government, ultimately. So he needed someone that could help regenerate the finance for the countries, because, of course, Sudan had nothing there. And he must have heard about us or something. And one thing led to another, and it worked out ultimately in the end. That's what got me into Africa, should we say, because of them.
So Sudan was your stepping stone into Africa.
It's not the best place, but I learned a lot.
Well, we're going to start somewhere.
Talk about being thrown into the deep end, but it was a good experience.
So Sudan was what year that you were there?
I think they've been there since 2012. I moved in around 2014, thereabouts, maybe slightly before. So it was during the peace negotiations where we helped broker the peace negotiations within Sudan, and then the company itself took over the oil blocks, where we own 51% of the Sudabet. And from that, it helped us regenerate the finance for the country. And we invested around €1 billion into a sugar refinery into Sudan. And then obviously built on the infrastructure, should we say, accordingly. But unfortunately, the civil war started again and everything came to a halt.
Step back. So I know we're talking about Morocco, but now you open up the whole can of worms with Sudan, and for our listeners to understand what happened. So 2014, you're called to Sudan to help build this company. Yes. To fix the financial system, or to help the country get access to the financial markets. Is that
yes. So we needed to somehow raise capital to rebuild the country, because the country was completely destroyed for the war, etc. from there. So we had to find a way that we can raise the capital to help rebuild a proper country for the people. And Sudan has a lot of in-ground assets, a lot of assets which were untouched. It's got a lot of oil and gas, it's got a lot of agriculture, it's got a lot of minerals. So that's where we came up with a new financial model in order to generate the finance for the country and start the rebuilding of it.
Okay, and now give me the high-level picture of this financial model. What did it look like in the case of Sudan? And I assume that is something that inspired you now for Morocco.
So we quickly learned that we can make use of debentures and financial assets or guarantees. So when we had the support of the US government to the Sudanese government, we quickly learned that there's a new model where you can borrow money from the banks without jeopardizing the sovereignty of the country. And that's where I found a unique way to utilize these negotiation skills that we have. And basically, we managed to raise roughly around 5 to 10 billion euros of pledges from the banks to rebuild the country, subject to terms and conditions, obviously. But that's what led me with the fascination of blockchains to in-ground. Before crypto came into the market, it's built up towards that. So I think my skills and experience utilizing in-ground assets ultimately led me to where we are today, which we'll obviously discuss a bit later on.
Okay, so what you essentially did was take the natural wealth of Sudan and use that as a collateral against loans that you would raise from international banks or from the IMF, or?
It was mostly international banks. And we had several other trading models. So we had the flexibility where we could utilize the money given. So ultimately, the banks can give you up to 100% of the guarantees. So if we have a bond, for example, of 1 billion, we can borrow up to 1 billion. And on very low rates, because it's for humanitarian purposes. So ultimately, from that, we can utilize it to generate additional finance. So we could then start the agriculture side to the oil, to the refineries for the oil, to the sugars, to the wheat. We had big wheat products as well from Sudan. And you can just use that money to reinvest it and to ultimately turn it around to generate more finance at a much, much higher level. That was the model that I used anyways when doing it.
Okay. And then after that, so the second civil war started what year? When did this come to a halt?
I don't think it actually ever came to a halt. There was always going on in the background, but I think it was in 2016, thereabouts, where we had to stop our operations because there was too many political elements coming into it. And for me, I decided that enough, I had to leave. I wasn't prepared to do some stuff that they wanted us to conduct whilst there. I had my limits. So I decided to part ways with the company. And I set up then. I moved into Cable Exchange Ghana from there, where ultimately I used my skills to then slowly become the CEO of the group.
Okay, but during that time you lived in Ghana or you worked from Morocco?
At that particular time, I was actually in Dubai. So I was living in Dubai and I was always backwards and forwards. Then I went to Ghana and we started working out the deals over there. And I decided that I wouldn't live in Ghana, but I decided to come and live in Morocco, ultimately.
Because of your wife?
Well, I met my wife after, but I think Morocco has a much better infrastructure right now in order to live in. And that's one. It was close to England, it was close to Ghana, it was close to Europe. So strategically, I was always in and out of these regions. So for me, it was more convenient.
Okay, so it shows Morocco as a midpoint between Europe, the UK, and Ghana, with the company you worked for being in Ghana and being strategically located. Okay, makes sense. So then, what was that year, 2016, you moved to Morocco?
2016, actually moved to Morocco prior to that. So it was in 2014, end of 2014 when I moved to Morocco officially. And ever since, it was only meant to be a 2-week trip. 10 years later, I'm still here.
I know what you're saying. I came to Cape Town for 3 months and I'm still here. Having met my wife here.
Exactly. It's always the ladies.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So from Sudan to Ghana to Morocco, mainly for strategic reasons. And then you got stuck in Morocco. And how did your entrepreneurial exploration of Morocco lead you into your next venture, the Money In?
So before Money In, we were doing a little bit of financial consulting and investments in real estate. Unfortunately, I was still new to the market in Morocco. I thought I knew it all, but clearly I didn't. Did lose a lot of money as a result, but we live and we learn, and I took that as an experience. But it was actually during COVID period where we got stuck completely in Morocco because of the restrictions that I met Vanit, my business partner or co-founder of Money In. And it was at that particular point where we realized how, I don't know the best word to use, but how terrible the system was when it comes to financial transactions, to just generally how people are spending their money in the first place. We quickly learned Morocco is a debt society. Everyone was borrowing money, but yet no one had a bank account. Literally, I think the statistics were around 70% of the population didn't have a bank account in Morocco.
Wow, 70%.
It was something like this that the World Bank statistics were. 70%. They would say because you can't, depending on how you deem the population, but even then it's still over 50%, which is unbanked. So something had to change. For us, I'm used to instant transfers. In Morocco, it didn't exist. To do an instant transfer, it took 3 days, just as long as an international transfer, which for me, that's not how you can conduct business. It scuppers your deals, it causes delays, it causes issues. So this is where we decided that why don't we use our skill sets in the digital element and start our own institution? And ultimately, the Money In platform was created in the hope that the economy or the government will give us the license to roll it out completely.
Interesting. So what I mean, getting a banking license is not the easiest thing. And assuming in Morocco, probably if the banking landscape is sort of that unsophisticated, I would assume that the regulation plays a part of that. Or what is the regulation? Is it easy?
It's not easy. Even now, we're still waiting for our final approval. It's been 2 years, and we're still fighting. Not fighting, but we're still pleading with the regulators to understand our model. The impression that I'm getting is that I don't believe they fully understand technology that we have, and it's something new to the market. So when a person doesn't really understand the technology, it's hard to give a license unless they fully understand it's safe, which I can appreciate and I can understand. But the market's grown dramatically. And if you look at the examples for the rest of Africa, digital payments have taken off massively in countries where people never thought it would ever exist. And these are the challenges and obstacles that we face, is educating the regulators that this is the way forward. But I know we're upsetting some people in the background too, which doesn't help as well. The banks, of course, don't like what we're trying to achieve.
That.
Exactly. And that's where the resistance can be.
So if you compare Morocco to other African countries, and I think M-Pesa is the example that comes to mind as being sort of at the forefront in Kenya, where would you place Morocco in terms of like the quality of the banking infrastructure with digital payments? Something like.
If I was to say that the infrastructure itself, the infrastructure I would say is one of the best that I've ever seen, going deep into it, better than Europe, better than everywhere else. But the implementation to businesses, or allowing businesses to make use of this, doesn't exist. And that's the lack, that's the fault, where I see that Morocco will not achieve much if they don't open this up to everyone to utilize. That's what's letting them down, in my opinion, anyways.
So the regulation is holding back the full development. It's not the infrastructure.
It's the regulations or whoever, but something's holding it up. Whether it's political, I don't know, but something's holding it up, which is delaying the progress of Morocco.
Well, that sounds as like an even bigger task. I mean, it's one thing to build something, to develop a technological solution, but I think it's an even bigger task to change regulation and change the way people, I mean, in the end, it's about how people think about something or how they perceive something, and to change that perception.
I think it's more along the lines that they've had bad experience. They did try to launch some digital payments in 2010 and they couldn't convince the population to switch. But that's 2010 and this is 2023. There's a big difference between then and now. I think that they should allow companies like us to re-educate the people, and the people will trust. Maybe people don't trust existing structures, but if we educate them of the benefits, then I believe we can convince them. And that just now we haven't launched, but yeah, we have over 4,000 pre-registrations in less than 4 months. We have over 6,000 international merchants that no one's ever achieved to come and convince them to come to Morocco. So what we've done in a short period of time, no one's done in a lifetime of Morocco. So that's how I see that we can make a great benefit to the economy if they just allow us that opportunity.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, it's sort of a matter also to demonstrate that there is interest and people are signing up. So you have built a groundswell of support for your solution, and you're using that as a bargaining chip with the regulators.
Exactly.
Okay, so, and I mean, that's really interesting to see where Morocco stands in comparison to other countries. How do you feel as an entrepreneur being in Morocco? I mean, is there sort of a vibrant scene? Do you guys hang out together? Are there business clubs? How do you reach out to other business owners?
I think as expats ourselves, it's there's groups of networking that you can do. We have a lot of support actually from your country, South Africa. The South African embassy are our biggest supporters. Then we have I can't fault him at all. He's actually helped us a lot when it comes to it, and helped us open the doors in South Africa as well. And then you've got the Indian embassy, which also supports us and helps us. And they get us involved in the networking to help us push our vision out in the Moroccan region. So we're getting a lot of support from other countries, and that helps us a lot networking. But when it comes to the locals, it's difficult because of the language. We don't speak the local language, unfortunately, and that can be a challenge when trying to network with them. But at the same time, we've had good experiences and bad experiences, should we say? So it's where your comfort level becomes.
You have to focus on the good experiences and
Exactly.
put down the bad ones. Okay. And do you have a team of people on the ground in Morocco, or how's your setup as a company?
We have a local partner. He's someone very respectful, reputable. He's based in Casablanca, and then of course he brings his team with him, which allows us to help promote the company and our vision, should we say, growing within Africa in general. And then we've got the local medias that support us massively, and that also helps. So I class all these groups as part of our team because without them, we would struggle a lot, or maybe we wouldn't even be here. Maybe we would have left by then.
Yeah. And do you have a team like in the traditional sense of like employees that you have to lead?
We have 5 total working on this particular project itself. That's including the founders. But so much, most of it is more about networking, discussing, speaking to the regulators, speaking to the different governments. This stuff we do ourselves. But once we do get the approval, then of course we are looking to employ and bring in a sizable team to help roll it out on a scalable size from there. So we have got that in mind, but it's not required just yet.
Cool. Thank you. Very insightful viewpoints on the Moroccan entrepreneurial ecosystem and also in comparison to other African countries.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I will come back to you when I'm in Ghana. I assume you have good connections there and might help with the podcast.
Oh, definitely. I can certainly introduce you to a few people who'll be more than happy to share their experience.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you.
No, thanks, Simon. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you again for giving us this chance to